Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Resident Evil Afterlife. So, this is kind of a strange time to talk about Resident Evil, and specifically also this movie. I had gone on to just call out that there's probably going to be another Resident Evil movie or show coming out at some point soon. And then all of a sudden, there's this trailer that drops that proves my point. And I'm like, okay, that's a little strange. Then I specifically go into Resident Evil Afterlife, and Resident Evil Afterlife is to exactly say the days leading up to when I'm going on and actually watching this, which is strange because this movie takes place in the beginning of May, as we come to consistently find that Alice herself is kind of cataloging all of this and talking about it within her recordings. I'd also to accidentally mention that a movie of Resident Evil is to have snow within it. And I confuse the titles because Retribution does have snow within it, as I come to find, because I was to kind of thumb through that movie. And it seems that both this one and that one technically have snow. Like, this one just has the Alaskan mountains. So that kind of covers to, say that there is snow in here, but it's a technicality. Retribution has actually them fighting in snow. Because there was a whole thing about people were to say that when do Resident Evil environments ever have snow within them? There's two examples of two movies back to back right here that are go on and have that occur. Resident Evil Afterlife is to feel more like a later Matrix film. It's to feel like Fully Loaded or Revolution. I want to call this Resident Evil Fully Residential, or something that would connect to a Matrix title, because it makes more sense. Even the bullet stuff and the fighting, it just comes off as very Matrix-X, because they have to, because this is a 3D titled film. So everything is to go on and give you that, whoa, even to a point where one of our characters legitimately has to say, whoa, like Keanu Reeves does in the Matrix films. Because I'm like, well, at least they didn't say whoa in this movie, but then we get the whoa. And I'm like, oh, well, like, it covers it all in this movie. So, if not also, this movie is to very much feel like a Silent Hill kind of film. We'd come to find out instead of a pyramid head, they have a Axeman, a big behemoth of a character that goes on and has this big, huge wielding of battle axe that comes crashing down, having both Alice and Claire within this bathroom, strange environment, to try to fight this thing off. And I mean, fight it off. So, and then we go into Retribution, and there are to be multiple Axemen within that. So, if you're enjoying the one Axemen within this film, there'll be multiples in that film, as if they're there to go on and just be like, hey, what would be better in the next film? Well, two of these big behemoth things, because one of them was just not good enough. Like, just really? Okay, right, sure, whatever. So, all right, like, great. So, they just want to up the ante in these Resident Evil films, but they're running out of antes at this point. So, we have Chris and we have Claire being put in place in this movie. I like that they do at least give Chris some time of like a story explanation of how he got to where he was within this prison. And like they try to give Claire and barely Chris some more things to do in this film. And that actually is to be nice. But it's all, of course, is to lead to, like, an overpower house of Alice through the beginning of the film needing to go on and find Wesker, and by the end of the film, her needing to be face-to-face with him and fight him off. So, we bounce around in a number of different places within this film, and in all honesty, this movie started to remind me of, like, Terminator films, where we'd come to find that Alice is the same old like T-800 Arnold model going up against like liquid metals and the Terminator, anti-Terminator, etc., like the bigger, flashier, more unique models that eventually uh, should be overwhelmingly doing Arnold in, but they're just somehow that he just keeps figuring out how to win every single time because he's freaking Arnold. But anyways, so because I guess just experience wins over new flashy toy. So hence why you probably don't need to like rebuy the Arnold action figures after a while, because what bells and whistles are you really missing from uh, X number of movie? But anyways, so I go on and I have I think a T3 Terminator action figure, so I do have one. Like I have one. It's not from me, probably from the best movie, but it doesn't matter anyways. Uh, it's probably not going to be one that's going to be high value, but whatever. So Resident Evil Afterlife, like I said, bounces around quite a bit. It starts off in Japan, Hollywood, then it seems to be made its way to Alaska, and then it's like, nah, it's just going to a boat. It's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because if you look at the remake of Dawn of the Dead, that ends up in a boat anyways. So yeah, we just have to have these zombie films that kind of end in a boat, right? It just makes a lot of sense. Because you're out on your own, uh, and it seems to be like the safest route, where all you need to do is just find some kind of way of getting off the boat to eventually get on land so you can scavenge and then make your way back to the boat. Anyways, so Resident Evil Afterlife is to expand its zombies by going on and having these weird flower or butterfly like tentacles that comes from out of their mouths or their faces. And I can go on and be like, okay, yeah, like Blade 2 goes on and has that like weird like thing where it goes on and like comes out from here and does that. So like I can understand why they took that idea. And also when you kind of look at the whole red and white symbol of the Umbrella Corporation, they had to do that X thing anyways, right? It makes the most sense visually. So that was actually a really smart move that I think people might not have been like, oh yeah, the like this, like it matches the Umbrella Corp symbol. So Resident Evil is to go on to give us Afterlife, which I think was better than actually Extinction, surprisingly enough. So if you guys have gone on to possibly watch all these, I think they are still worth it. I think Retribution feels very much like a Fast and Furious kind of version of Resident Evil, because they have cars now. They have cars. Leon is to also be in the sequel movie, and then we've completely forgotten that Chris even exists. So isn't that great? Unless I'm wrong, because maybe I'm not sure about that film exactly. Maybe they write him out or figure out a way to get rid of him or something. Or maybe he's cameoed somewhere in there that I'm not really aware or sure of. Either way, um, we get to see Leon in the next film, which is great. I get to see a Leon live action version, so that's cool. So with that said, it's time to really just push on into full on spoilers and maybe even tee up this movie, because I probably haven't really gone into much description about what really happens in this one. So I'll tee it up a little bit here. So we have the movie that in monologue is to remind us of the second film in its beginning. And then in the second film, it kind of goes back into, by the end, uh, Alice going on and having that camcorder and talking into it. We go on and re-reference that within this film. And I'm like, oh man, that actually is cool that they brought that back. So Alice goes on and is now like just flying around with this airplane, trying to figure out where is the best place to be safe at this point. uh, because she goes on and retraces her steps to find out where exactly that Umbrella Corporation helicopter had landed, where her friends were last, and she finds this guidebook, and it's like, okay, what happened to them? Like did they survive? Like did they get caught? Like where are they now? Because they're not obviously out this helicopter. Like where did they transition from? And Alice just doesn't know. All of a sudden, Alice will go on and get attacked by Claire, who is to be estranged from her, and Alice doesn't get why. All of a sudden, we'll come to find that Claire has this scarab upon her chest, this red and metal looking scarab. That if you guys have never seen like the Blue Beetle comic book from DC Comics, I'm sure you never have. Yeah, like, or also maybe like the Mummy. They have these like kind of just spider robotic looking things that latch on to these people's chests and are to eventually have them to be mind controlled by them. And when even they take them off their chest, it's to really have them not know who this person is in front of them. Like the memory eventually comes back slowly but surely. Because Claire just needs something to do in this film to make her to be a more interesting character than she was in the last film. So we then would push on to have both Claire and Alice find a place where there are survivors within this prison. They go on and they crash land upon this prison, and they start meeting up with these people within there. But more and more they go into this prison, they start to realize that there are sounds that are coming from somewhere within the prison, and they're not quite sure what exactly it is. Zombies are trying to figure out a way to burrow their way in, and eventually, when they find out that these zombies have burrowed their way into the prison, it becomes too late. The guys need to figure out a quick way to get the heck out of there, and so they have to go on and also figure out a way to armor up. They need to go to this armory to get a bajillion bullets in a room just chock-a-block full with way too much guns that two people cannot whatsoever carry. But this very much reminded me of like the Matrix, where Neo goes out like, guns. We need a lot of guns. And then they just have a whole huge thing that just comes phasing in. And like there's an unlimited amount of guns that they can just pull from. And man, if they really were gonna go on and really armor up, man, they should have had like like the Matrix did, how there were like guns just coming out of anywhere, everywhere from them. But they just didn't. Uh, I guess that's the difference between Matrix and this kind of film. That it's like they're trying to be a little bit more realistic. That these people can't hold um, tons and tons of pounds of guns because it at some point just doesn't make sense feasibly for them to just be walking around like yeah. Um, but anyways, so eventually it comes to people are choosing where they're trying to escape. Bennett goes on and goes off on his own on the plane, whereas the rest of our characters decide that they're going to burrow into the hole that was already put into them through the zombies. So they all try to escape and eventually try to make their way to the Arcadia boat that they've gone on to binocularly uh, look into. So they go on to make their way to this boat to come to find out that the boat is now a salvation, that it's their own trap, that they've gone on to make a big mistake by coming here, and ultimately they have to go on and face off against an incredible threat called Wesker that technically Alice had tried to fight earlier within this film and had miserably failed. So Wesker is going on with Alice to say that he is to, of course, need her to consume her or ingest her, so that way he can keep his problem of T virus at bay, that he can take more control of it. And like, what is this? Like Venom? Like, is it like a symbiote to him? Like is that his kind of level of infection, that like he's kind of going through that? Because that's what I'm thinking in my own mind, that he's trying to feed the beast so it can kind of be kind of tamed again. But anyways, so by the end of the film, there is no significant victor here. If anything, there's just like, hey guys, there's going to be another film. There's going to be another one of these. And eventually, within sequel, unlikely allies will happen because eventually there's a more bigger threat going on. There's a whole another way for them to go on and give you another cliffhanger ending for Retribution, and and really just at this point just go on and be like, hey, final chapter is eventually going to happen at some point. And that is going to definitively, when they say final chapter, to actually be the last of what seems to be these films, which is kind of weird because normally when you say like the final chapter, they make like 12 other films and they're like, no, the final chapter, and then they just kind of just keep going until, wait a minute, there's there's one more story that we could just tell. We could just milk this thing just a little bit more. And like, that's a funny thing where they think that it's going to be the last movie, so they should not have gone on and done a definitive, like, this is the last one we're doing. No, like, just have it to be just Resident Evil, some goofy title, and then realize at some point they're going to go on and they're going to eventually just keep doing Resident Evil things anyways. So it won't be with this person. It won't be with these same people. It probably won't even be with Leon's and and Chris's and Claire's and whoever that people have really known from the video games. It'll just go on and be whoever they can get, or whoever anybody can just share the names that it doesn't really make sense that they have them. Because look at the reboot movie. So with that said, let's go on. Let's pause this here. I'll get into the actual movies. I'll rattle all this off, and then hopefully have this be an uploaded thing. Yeah, so people might just find it strange that I was to probably go on and upload War Machine way too late, because I'm sure a lot of people are like, why the review that? I don't know. Some people, somebody had gone on to decide that they wanted War Machine to eventually be reviewed way too late, I'm sure, but I did it anyways. If anything, I'm trying to keep to the stuff that I have people vote for. So I'm trying to at least uh, get all this stuff done at some point. I'm sorry how late it becomes. I'm sorry how uh, long it ends up being before I get to stuff that I've mentioned and said that I'm going to do. But ultimately, there's a lot of times it kind of is to be like whatever breeze hits me that day. It comes to the fact of like, oh, I'm going to benefit very much off of the thing that I am to go on and to have reviewed the last without me really knowing. So I want to keep adding to that and going into this kind of thing, because like Resident Evil was just some random thing where I'm like, okay, I'll watch this second movie at some point, and then all of a sudden the second movie came a number of films after that. So like that's just a coincidental thing that it just became. Because normally I don't do much of sequels to much of anything. Like look at the last 10 to 20 things that I probably reviewed on this channel. They've been a lot of one-offs. Look at the 100 last things, a lot of one-offs. Even things that have big, huge movie franchises, I haven't really fully covered. Like X-Men obviously should have been a thing that I probably should have finished off at some point, and I never did. There's a lot of like one or movies that I could have finished off a number of things and that could have benefited me somewhere within the supernatural things, but I didn't because I'm just like, man, like whatever. Like I'll get to it at some point, because it won't do anywhere as well at all whenever I do it. Like unless, and even when I was to try to attempt it on its actual release date, it wasn't going to do well either. So it's just like, man, like oh well. So with that said, it's about that time to go on and make our way into spoiling this. So let's pause this here. I will get to definitively the things of which that I am going to go into full on spoilers about. So next movies I'm probably going to go on and cover. There's still for me to probably think that there's going to be some thing to use Attack the 50-Foot Cheerleader for, because algorithm tells me that, or notes tell me that within YouTube. So I'm being very honest with people. I'm gonna go on and do that movie at some point. I may go on and double dip it with some other project that could go on and be fun to do, and may go on to be more impactful than whatever that thing will probably end up being that I'm just gonna do for YouTube. Uh, I'm kind of tempted to do a lot of weird, goofy, just ideas of just fun projects. Like there's a possibility that may go on and do uh Kung Pao Into the Fist. That's a goofy, funny, weird movie that I can probably just chuck in with the Attack the 50-Foot Cheerleader movie that I could do. I'm thinking about that because of how short that movie is. Uh, there's a possibility I'm going on and at some point doing Risky Business. There's still Resident Evil movies that I'm planning on doing in the future. Teen Wolf is something that I'm going to bring back. That it seemed to have done well enough a majority of the time on the channel, and it seems that there's a good number of people that have talked about me bringing it back. So I will try and do that. Because I'm trying to listen to everybody. Like I'm trying to hopefully get what people want on the channel instead of just doing my weird cockamamie ideas that end up going nowhere. And there's a reason for that. But every once in a while, there's some good every once in a while, right? I sometimes do good, but not all the time. Uh, but anyways, I'm really still having fun with all these videos. I'm really just having fun. I'm not really usually like I'm planning stuff, but I'm not sticking to anything. Um, I'm having fun. So if that becomes my own detriment, then I'm willing to just fall on that sword. But feasibly, I'm to just go on and just be at a happy medium. Like I'm very happy right now. I feel like that um, regardless of the donut holes that I may be having come soon, um, within the stuff I reviewed, like I don't care. Like I've gone on and had like so much consistency before that, had so many surprise successes. So I'll take it. I'll take whatever I can get at this point and be happy. So with that said, let's get into this. So it's about that time to do that song and dance. It is spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this movie. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about Resident Evil Afterlife. Maybe you hated it. Maybe you thought it was crap. Maybe we're to go on and be baffled and confused by this film, because maybe at some point I was too. And maybe I'll talk about that at any point within this movie. Like, yeah, this is the point that kind of confused me. Anyways, so just to clickbait you and where was he confused? It doesn't really matter, but it's okay. So we now cut to the very beginning of this film. So spoilers, everybody. Finally, so we make our way into Japan where we come to find that an outbreak was to have gone on and happened. So within the last episode, we kind of foreshadowed that there are different branches all over the world that are to be Umbrella Corporation. So this is to infect them or affect them within Japan. So the first thing we see is some random woman with a number of people with umbrellas who are all just kind of walking around. This girl goes on and finds this man who's kind of walking by her. She lunges at him and nibbles on his neck and kills him. So we then restart this movie very similar to the second movie, how it starts, about how they go on and they talk about the viral weaponry and how a virus escaped and everybody died. Very similar to the second one. Maybe even also similar to stuff that was probably said in the third one, but was to also talk about eventually how the world became a wasteland, and that was to be probably very much different. So maybe all this bit of dialogue is always sound the same at some points or reiterated. So if anything, I haven't watched the first one in a very long time. So they talk about how a virus was escaped and how it didn't stay dead. How there was a sort of an apocalypse, kind of referencing Resident Evil apocalypse, but also in general a zombie apocalypse. So, but also they would expand to say that some people are going on and being uh, taken in as refugees and being experimented on, and for those people that thought that they were safe in their fortresses, eventually will come to find out that they're wrong. Because we expand this to 4 years later. So we now cut to these two sharpshooters, and they're going on and having this game, like kind of like the remake of Dawn of the Dead, where we come to find that these guys have these like whiteboards and they're talking to one another. And so he goes on and says, "Hey, yeah, you go on and you shoot Burt Reynolds," and he goes on and shoots Burt Reynolds. Kind of the same thing here. So what ends up happening briefly after this is all of a sudden we come to find that something flies into frame and kills both sharpshooters, and they're kind of oblivious of what that really was. So now we cut to this environment of the Umbrella Corporation headquarters in Tokyo. So we have Chairman Wesker, because he has to be Chairman Wesker now. He can't just be normal Wesker. So, whatever. So, maybe it was always Wesker. I don't know. I'd have to look at just Resident Evil lore for whatever reason. Anyways, so Chairman Wesker goes on and talks to this technician, and he eventually goes on and tells him about this technical problem, about how they continue to start losing all of their people, and it has gone down to losing every single one. Wesker goes on to say, "Why isn't that you haven't told me about any of this?" And the guy's like, "Well, hey, I didn't want to worry you. I thought there was just some technical uh like sound problems we were having, but we come to find out that it was a lot more, that people were just ending up dead." So we then would have Wesker that gets in contact with this captain, so that way he can report in. And as soon as the two of them start talking, he ends up dead also. So now we go on to have Wesker who wants every security possible to just be on guard and like this isn't a drill, like let's go on and whatever this is, let's take it out because like it could be anything because of how this world is now. So we have a bunch of guards that all make their way to what looks like this elevator, assuming that what's going to come out of it is going to be a big, massive threat. And then we come to find that that threat, as the doors open, seems to be non existent. It's like, okay, so what are we waiting for? Come to find out from a ventilation shaft from behind them, we'd come to find that this is Alice, and this is to be a cloned version of herself. We can obviously see that because of look for the very specific hairstyle of this for the very specific clone version. And even that, there's no way to tell that that is to actually be Alice Prime. That Alice Prime is to actually be the character that we eventually see later. So Alice goes on, makes her way from dropping from the ventilation, and sorts her way through all of these guards. Goes on to have two blades and like is just slicing her way through them, like flying, chopping off two heads at the same simultaneous time up into the air, and doing these very heavy, massive just attacks here. So even to the point where she goes on and she fires off a sword through a guy's head while he has a helmet on. So it's just like, wow, okay, like these swords are absurdly sharp. So eventually, as a number of other guards start to line up here with their shields in place, we then have Alice that uses her psychic ability of being able to move stuff with her mind and eventually starts to hugely demolish a large number of men that are to be in her wake. So, as Alice starts to make her way to try and check if there are any other security guards that she needs to mow down here, all of a sudden she ends up getting shot in the back by a guard that drops her from behind. As the guards start to surround the one Alice, assuming that that one threat is all but over with, all of a sudden out of the woodwork there appear three different Alices, with one in the middle having swords and the two off to the side having both guns. Having the one Alice in the middle explaining, hey boys, is that any way to treat a lady? And then boom, off we go with bullets flying, action, and chaos ensue. So we have Wesker who is going on and monitoring these attacks, and we see that one Alice is to be firing off the camera to disable Wesker's line of sight. To eliminate the threat, Wesker is to go on and ask that they just put Nerf gas everywhere. And the technician goes on to tell Wesker that it's like, wait a minute, our guys are down there too. And Wesker fires off a headshot to this technician and asks anybody any other questions. I don't like Wesker does not go on and consider this guy's life valuable. So why would he go on and consider the people on the ground at all nothing but expendable at this point? If he can kill the threat and eliminate it, then he will do so because they're going to die anyways. So, because these guys are absolutely no match for Alice. Plus, also, there is no way to be sure how many versions of clones that Alice really has here. That could really be a large threat to, of course, this environment. So, as further we go along here, we have Alice. And we have another Alice that is to both have these these guns with them, these kind of machine-esh like guns. So what they do here, as the two of them go on and they pull these grenades and they throw them, and then weirdly, strangely enough, as they're running, they fire off and kill off most of the guys anyways. So it kind of feels like a waste of two explosives, but who am I to really judge? So both of these two Alices go on to jump down this long stretch of this very open area, to almost make it look like they're doing like the Batman Forever, whereby the third act of that movie, we'd go on to have like the whole watery grave thing, and Robin or Nicole Kidman is going to be plunging down this watery grave. So it ends up being this very strange, long um, pipe that ends up having this watery grave by the bottom of it. And so Batman has to choose between them. And so eventually he chooses both of them and he saves them both at the same time. It's kind of like the same thing. Or we'd come to find Trinity in the Matrix movie, where she goes on and when she's supposed to like be killed off, that she goes on and she falls from that building for a very long time. Same thing's kind of going on here. So, but we have our Alices, they go on and they have these like Gatling guns that is to be hitting the ceiling of this building as they go falling endlessly. So the Alices are shooting around, killing off all of the guards through the uh, through the floors that they're falling down from. And we even have Wesker that is firing up at them because he's at the very lower floor. So Wesker eventually goes on and wipes out one of the Alices, but the other one lands and does this kind of flip to just drop. So eventually we come to find that this Alice is to come to not be a good enough match for Wesker, and Wesker goes on and kills Alice here. But then, as Alice is to be kind of pushed aside, uh, we come to find out that Alice is to have grenades in her hand, and now Wesker needs to run away from this huge, massive explosion. Wesker gets out in time to escape this explosion to make his way into uh, this plane-like copter. It's very strange of what exactly this plane could exactly be, but I'm sure there's a name of it somewhere, of which that I couldn't have been bothered to look up for 2 seconds. But anyways, I'm going to go with plane. If I'm incorrect at some point, you guys can go on and correct me in the comments below. I'm just going to not take the time to need to know every bit of everything of Resident Evil. Or whatever this name plane is, or whatever it is. So, we'd come to find Wesker lifting off of this plane as the Alices, which are to have a good number of about probably 8 clones here, 9 clones, somewhere in there, that have all made their way to try to fire off Wesker as he's trying to leave, but Wesker's like, yeah, there's no way they're going to get to me. So Wesker should then go on and leave a explosive charge for this facility, and he detonates it. All the Alices are going on and realize that they need to get the heck out of there, but there's no way for them to dodge this explosion. The further and further this explosion goes bigger and wider and more elaborate, there could be no justification that all these clones got out in time. It just would not make sense. All of them had to have died. So we would have Wesker, which it seems to be getting away scot-free with all of these Alice clones being killed. But then we come to find out that Alice will be on Wesker's plane, and she will be having the hair that looks somewhat similar to this, and we'd have to assume that, okay, this is Alice Prime. Like, this is to be uh, the definitive Alice, right? We'd like to think so, but then also we'd have to realize that there's a good chunk of movie that we still have to cover here. So Alice goes on and puts a gun to Wesker and ends up asking him any last words. Wesker does have a last word, and it's an injection going into Alice's neck, thrusting from behind, jabbing her in the neck with this injection. So Wesker goes on to have this specific injection to make Alice human, which is kind of weird because Wesker needs Alice. He wants to ingest her so that way he can keep his infection at bay. But maybe Wesker is even to sniff or whiff or something that this isn't actually Alice Prime. That's maybe why he's going on and making her human instead of going on and ingesting her and fighting her within this plane. I would have to have assessed. So Wesker goes on to explain the injection is to make her human. And if anything, Alice is actually happy that she is to, before she dies, live seconds as a human before that occurs. So if anything, he's actually doing something nice for Alice instead of something that she doesn't want. So we have Wesker that it seems is to not be paying much attention to him needing to, of course, fly this plane. And all of a sudden, as Wesker looks back at his instruments, he realizes that this plane is eventually going to crash land. So Wesker tries to make his way to the the instruments of the plane to make adjustments, but eventually all becomes too late. There is to be a big, huge, massive explosion, and eventually the plane crashes. So we are to assume that Wesker does not make it out of all this, but we come to find different, because eventually this movie has to go on. There has to be a third act. So I know this is ruining a lot of the movie, but also it's just like, well, if you're at spoilers now, it's kind of a moot point, because there has to be more of this film. We can't go on and end these characters so early because it just wouldn't make a lot of logical sense now, would it? So now we cut to 6 months later, where the actual Alice, to come to find that there seems to be an emergency frequency that is coming from Alaska that goes on over and over again, talking about how they're free from infection, and that there's a safe place, and it's in a town called Arcadia that's in Alaska. So here is where Alice goes on and starts to do her captain's logs, or her basically recordings, talking about May 3rd, 600 hours, mentioning about how long it's been since there's been signs of life, and what exact longitude and latitude she's to go on and be in, that she's not quite yet seen Arcadia yet on a map, and if anything, she hopes at some point that Claire and Kmart and all the others from Extinction had gone on to survive. So Claire goes on to land her plane in a airfield full of all other planes. As Claire starts to make her way just through this area, there's all of a sudden this one random moment where we see that there's something running off to the side that is not to be exactly aware by Alice at this point, but she will be more aware of it. So, forcing then Alice to say, "Hello, are you there?" Like, who is it? And all kinds of like introduction like statements. So, Alice comes to find the helicopter that Kmart and Claire were to have been last seen in, even to the point where she used to go on and re-find back her guidebook, which she had given to Kmart within previous movie. So Alice goes on to again go into her camcorder and make yet another statement, or another log, uh, where she's starting to give up on Arcadia. She doesn't think that it's really to be a thing that's a safe haven. So, and now she's just left at being at a beach. And at this point is to uh, just to be confused why exactly this helicopter was to have been brought there, but they don't know. But she has no idea where um, this helicopter of people went after that. Like, there's no track of where, like, okay, where are they gone now? Like, Alice at this point is just playing catch up. So but Alice is also kind of giving up on the fact that at some point she may die, or no one will ever be alive enough, probably in this world, for them to go on and actually watch her tapes. No one will really care about them. Which, that actually makes a good point. It's like, she's doing this whole log for no real reason, if anything, to just kind of try to figure out a way to keep herself sane. Oh, just having this project to do. But anyways, so here's where Alice goes on and starts to make her way through the uh the airplane field, and eventually is calling out for somebody, screaming out, "Hello, answer me." So Alice goes on to make her way to this plane that it seems that the door is kind of wiggling. So as Alice makes her way to the plane, there is a number of crows that start attacking her. She falls to the ground. And then shortly thereafter that, Alice is to be seemingly be attacked by somebody who looks so dirty that you can't really make out exactly who it is, because of course you don't. You need to like pause this just right with the movie, be like, oh yeah, that's so and so. But anyways, so as Alice starts to fight this mysterious person, the more and more the combat starts to happen, we'd come to find that this is none other than Claire as she falls to the ground because Alice is to overpower her. Weirdly enough, as Alice starts to inspect Claire's body, she sees this spider lodged within Claire's chest, ripping it off and hoping that Alice will have Claire remember who she is, because Alice figures out that this is to have with this scarab to be some memory loss attached to it. So as Claire wakes up in a very caveman-esque like form, Alice is to apologize for what she had did to Claire, and is to hope that she remembers her, which she doesn't. So she starts to talk about the Nevada desert, uh, and continue to be like, "Hey, does this sound familiar? Uh, like Mikey, Carlos, LJ, any of these things ringing a bell? Resident Evil Extinction. Do you need the Blu-ray and DVD? You were Claire." The character that's very important in Resident Evil things. Any of this? Anyways, so Alice goes on and mentions that they're heading to Alaska again. So all of a sudden now, we find from what looks like this satellite feed for there to be this like kind of night vision, like Arcadia, remember, and kind of goes off in the distance. So now we cut to both Alice and Claire going into the plane, and Claire is to be tied up. Claire eventually remembers that this girl is Alice, but doesn't remember much else. At some point, Claire is to hope that Alice is going to cut her free from uh, these ropes that she was on because she's no real threat to her. But Alice is just unsure. It's like, are you going to turn on me in any second? Like, if anything, like let's kind of just get some of your mind and some of your faculties back to you before I go on, and I actually decide to just cut you loose. So Alice goes now on her log, on her vlog, on her camcorder. She goes on to mention what had happened to Claire, going on to mentioning about the scarab and how it infected her and how it drugged her with memory loss, and she hopes that the effects aren't permanent. So now we cut back away from this like weird night vision, uh, like binocular from a distance kind of view, as to maybe say like I guess that this could probably be like a video game perspective or something like that. Like if you want to just have a map of the location that these characters are in, like I guess this is probably what this is. Maybe someone would have to go on and inform me in the comments below what exactly this is. But anyways, so and here's where Claire talks about how this is Alice and that's her name. So Alice is to start asking Claire more about like, well, hey, do you know what happened to you? Like, do you know what led you up to the point of meeting me? And Claire doesn't really remember. Uh, she doesn't even know what her name is. And Alice goes on and tells her that her name is Claire Redfield. Claire, after going on and hearing her name, cannot really match it to herself. It seems very unfamiliar. Or it sounds familiar, but if anything, or it doesn't sound familiar to her really. Anyways, so here's where Claire first asks to get untied, but it'll take them going on and crash landing the plane for finally Alice to give her a knife to cut her loose, because eventually they're probably going to die anyways from probably this car or this plane crash going into this building, because that's what's going to happen next. So Alice is to plane her way to Hollywood. We see her flying over the Hollywood sign, and that is actually pretty cool. And it's also really interesting how destroyed this Hollywood sign really is. So Alice talks about how Hollywood is to be the city of angels, and so now again, Alice is going into her log, talking about how this is May 6th, 1800 hours, Los Angeles. No signs of life, not even the undead. Uh, the city looks burnt. and but it's about time to rest. Uh, or it's but if anything, it's a question about like what they're going to do next year. So as they continue to make their way through the buildings, eventually they go on and they see a sign that says like "Help us" or "Help." Yeah, help us. So they come to find that it's on top of this prison building. So they see survivors upon this building. So, like, okay, like, we're going to try and we're going to land there because how crazy that sounds. Like, that seems to be the only thing that they could be able to try to do here for how there's way too many zombies surrounding this building. So we now have Angel. I'm hopefully to try to remember every single one of these names as eventually they're recited within this movie at some point. I think every one of the names I think are said. So I'm just trying to remember them all and not have to look at the cast list that much. So Angel is going on being the guy with the binoculars that eventually is to start to do this kind of emergency siren going on to explain to everybody, hey, there's a plane up there. There's a plane. They all think that this is a plane coming from the boat because they had sent so many flares up that they're finally hoping that that plane is going to respond to them by bringing in a plane, which is not really the case. This is just this random bit of coincidence this is actually happening. So we see from the exterior of the building that there's not a good runway to really land anywhere on the streets because there's swarming of zombies everywhere. So they start to see that the plane is getting much lower. And so the guys are basically dodging the plane at this point. So they're coming up with the idea that it's like, okay, this person is going to try to land on this rooftop. So, like, okay, everybody, like, let's go crazy and let's all go on and let's give this person a runway because this person is crazy. So they start moving all these barrels and all these objects and all these things to try as best they can to give this uh, runway thing of a chance. Angel goes on and is to uh, bring out this bit of wire that can go on and stop the plane uh, from uh, from continuing on its momentum and can kind of slow it down. The wire or the thing that they use like only works so far and then eventually it breaks. But if anything, like these guys are trying to get everything out of the way so this plane can land. So as Alice is getting up the runway, we have like one last barrel that Luther is trying to move, and he just kind of has to move out of the way for Alice to then land. We also come to find characters like Bennett are like dodging and being thrust to the ground because there's a wing coming at him, so he like dodges it just in the nick of time. Coincidentally, the character that goes on to play Bennett in this movie was in the first Silent Hill movie. What a weird coincidence! Like this guy must really enjoy video game movies, or it's just kind of weird of a coincidence that he's kind of in both Resident Evil and Silent Hill. It's just wow, like guy's very versatile. But anyways, so plus also he never really plays like actually a good character, and he usually goes on and plays the person that eventually becomes evil at some point, or we have to just assume that he's going to play an evil guy because he always does. Maybe in Sons of Anarchy, he actually does play a seemingly solid and most of the time good dude. But yeah, most of the time he just plays really bad guys. I don't know what it is. That seems to be just his go-to thing. I don't know. Anyways, he gets paid either way, so good for him. So, uh, so the plane it goes on to eventually land on whatever is really this rooftop strip that it just needs to land on. And so the wire ends up getting pulled. The plane gets to the point where it crashes on to the very lip of this roof and is almost going to fall and start to teeter down. But then all of a sudden, we start to find the characters getting back up from once they had fallen from this rooftop, and they are running to this plane trying to uh, jump for it. Like we have Luther that makes this big, huge, massive jump to grab onto the plane, pushing it down with all of his weight, so that way they can pull the plane back, and so they can reverse this plane from falling off this roof here. So they kind of save them at like the last second here. So so now as both Alice and Claire get out of the plane, there now is a bunch of introductions going on, and everybody's saying who they all are. We get to a point where Bennett gets kind of agitated because he's like, okay, like we're done with the introductions. Like, who cares about the introductions? No one cares who these people's names are. We're gonna die tomorrow anyways. So Bennett goes on and asks the more important question to both Alice and Claire. It's like, are you the ones that are trying to help us? Like, yeah, they start to mention about how they started to fire off all those flares, and they were hoping that that ship that was nearby was going to send somebody to help them. Alice has no idea of what they're talking about, and is like, no, like I just ended up just being here by just pure accident. So, and if anything, Alice knows nothing about the boat, and eventually they'll go on and they'll hand her binoculars, and they will show her that that boat exists. So it's like, oh, that's what the Arcadia thing was. Oh, well, okay. Like, now that I found that, like, I can get the heck out of here. Because Alice goes on and on about Alaska, about how there's some survival place called Arcadia, and they're like, no, that's just some boat. I'm like, wait a minute, what? So they give her these binoculars for this boat, and like, oh, okay. So uh, but if anything, as soon as this plane was flying by, everybody got their hopes up, and then they realized that this plane probably doesn't have much of people that could really carry much of anybody. So, like, what good is this plane really going to do? It all depends on, like, who's going to kill who and be able to be the last ones on this plane. Because these people want to get out of here. So, now out of all the people, Alice starts to have a good chunk of time where she's with Luther here. So Alice goes on and says, like, you know what, there's something about you that, like, should be really familiar, and it just, like, is not clicking. Luther goes on to explain, it's like, well, yeah, I was a star basketball player, so you probably know me from that. Alice is like, nope, not a sports fan. So he's like, well, I do right over there have a big, huge billboard uh, that is to be of watches. Maybe you know about that. And then Alice is like, it's like, yeah. So, like, that's the whole kind of joke about, yeah, there's a billboard right over there that shows his face. So maybe that's the thing that he should be famous for. So Angel comes in and talks about how Luther is to be their resident superstar, and so here's exactly when they start talking more about Alaska, and this is when they give her the binoculars as the come to, like, oh, okay, kind of moment. So Alice figures out it's a ship, not a place, and so they too have been picking up this frequency and hoping that the flares would go on and get people to come their way, but they aren't. So but really they'd find out anyways that no one is really manning that ship, and if anything, the ship is just a trap anyway, so maybe they dodged a bullet there. Anyways, so Alice goes on and asks Claire if she remembers anything about the ship. And Claire remembers nothing about the ship. If anything, she barely remembers the beach. She goes on and remembers that she got out of the helicopter and that there were people there on these smaller boats getting to her, but she doesn't remember anything past that. So, uh, so now we have them come up with a plan of like, well, hey, we need to get to that ship now. Like that's our main objective. So now we cut to Angel firing off yet another flare, and Luther is going on and guiding Alice around the prison, going on and like, hey, this is cell block C or cell block B. So Luther goes on and guides Alice to Crystal, who we come to find out was a struggling artist or a struggling actress. She goes on and talks about how her agent was to go on and and talk to her, and so it's kind of funny that this actress ends up becoming a cook. So I guess it's just kind of, I guess some people are just have certain skills. Lucky enough, I guess. Like you would have thought that this girl would have gone on and said like, "Oh yeah, I was a chef here." Or, like you would think that this whole cook thing would end up there'd be a career thing that would have matched up before. But like I guess, uh, then why is it that Crystal has to be this cook out of all the people? I'm so confused. Anyways, cut away from this. So, but I guess like since she was technically in a restaurant environment because she was waiting tables, hoping for her big break that never was to come. Like so, I guess yeah, maybe there is some experience in just being involved in that kind of environment. I don't know. So they then go on and they talk about Bennett because Bennett cuts through everybody. It's like, hey, what are you guys all waiting for? Let's get some food. They talk about how he used to be this big movie producer and that he needs to get a stick out of his ass. So Crystal and Luther start talking to Alice about the plane, whether or not that she could still fly the plane, and if they could probably get them out of here, so that way they can escape. Alice says it's like, well, like we can only probably see two people. Plus, also the plane can only handle so much weight. Like if you probably think about it, you probably could go on and probably have a number of people if they have a good amount of duct tape or something to tie these people down. You could probably go on and probably have a good number of people that are to be on the wings and the whatever the plane. But eventually, like too much weight will go on and not be able to have this plane go on to to lift off because it all becomes about the weight of things. We'd come to find out in the Zombieverse show that eventually there are weight maxes for everything, even a helicopter. So yeah, eventually, uh, we'd have people that are to go on and need to stay at a certain location because the weight maximum is to have been reached here. So Alice goes on to say that it's like, well, like it can only fit two people at a time. I'd have to fly one person back and forth to this boat, and Luther is like, well, yeah, and that could get really dangerous, and like if anything, like that would be too risky to try to do. So they're of course like, well, we have to get to that ship, and it's like, well, yeah, we need to figure something out because everybody all needs to leave at once. So So Luther and Alice, Luther starts to bring up something, and Alice is to be like, okay, well, what are you, what? Luther goes on and says that there could be an alternate thing that they could try to do, but if anything, it's probably to be some like waste of time strategy that could benefit them. Alice goes on and like, well, hey, I want to be open minded and I want to have every strategy on the table. So if anything, like we have plenty of time to waste right now. So take me to what this alternative could be. So Alice and Luther make their way down these stairs to eventually meet up with a guy named Wendell who is guarding a guy named Chris. Uh, Chris is to be Chris Renfield. Chris is to be a guy that a lot of people know from the Resident Evil video game and sometimes movies, because he's randomly to be certain characters in some of these things. Um, Franchise. So yeah, and I mean that also in the animated stuff. Like he's in. I had seen Vendetta, and Chris is in that too. So yeah, like the Leons and the Chris's, they're all in these Resident Evil things at some points in time. So yeah, so it's just kind of interesting to see all these kinds of ways that Resident Evil is to be done because some people may not even know the animated things exist. But anyways, so Alice makes her way to meet up with Chris, and Chris is so easy to thrust his hand out and say hello and introduce himself. So Chris is to be mentioning how this is the girl who had flown the plane, and Alice is like, from all the way down here, how exactly could you have gone on and heard any of that? And Wendell is to mention about how he's hearing sounds, forcing him and Luther to check it out, and there's no definitive thing that can have them figure out what those sounds are coming from. But eventually, we'll come to find that the zombies are digging their way through to get into the prison somehow. But anyways, Luther and Wendell leave, and so Chris goes on to say to Alice that he can hear things too, like Wendell can, and so he's to go on to have heard that plane flying by. I think that's just it's a stupid thing to say, but like I think that that can also really just be Chris, who's to probably think, oh, yeah, you're a stranger here. How could you have possibly got on and gotten here? Well, you've had to have gotten here from a plane or a helicopter, right? Like, he just figured out a way to just say plane, and he was right about it. Like, he could have read this girl because maybe he's just good at reading people, and that's how he got uh, to the correct order of things to say, oh, yeah, you came here from a plane because he can read her, because maybe he's a profiler. Anyways, so Chris is hoping that Alice will be his saving grace. If anything, he's very much tired to have been locked away in this prison cell, and he's hoping that Alice will free him from it. Chris is to go on and say that if anything, he was locked into this prison cell because of a joke done by his people he was working with, and then he ended up just being stuck there. So, because Chris was to, of course, be a guard and not a prisoner, and with all the things that just kind of occurred with the zombie apocalypse during this prison, again, Chris just got locked away by accident within the cell to just be left to be rotting there. To eventually hope that Alice is going to be a person that is going to free him here, which of course she will. So, plus also Chris is to mention about how he has an alternative way to help this group out because he knows things that they don't about this environment, and he's willing to give up that information, but in turn, he wants his freedom. So, So Alice honestly is considering everything that Chris is saying, and is even asking Luther about it to see uh, about what Chris is saying and as if there is any fruition to what he's saying. Luther does not go on and like or trust Chris because he looks into his eyes and all he sees is a killer. Alice goes on and asks Luther, it's like, well, hey, when you look into my eyes, what do you see? And Luther doesn't answer. The next thing we see is Alice thrusting down a whole slew of arsenal with all these blades and all of these bullets and all of these things. They're to be rolled out like a red carpet. So here's where, of course, we get the whoa in this movie as if this is Matrix. So Alice goes on and tells Luther, it's like, well, hey, a girl's got to be prepared. It's like, yeah, like there's prepare and there's an arsenal. This girl, it seems to be pretty close to that. Also, Alice to be chucking out all of these coins, and Luther is to be like, okay, what are the coins for? And Alice is like, well, I just have a collection. It's a hobby. And so she starts stacking up all these coins because I guess it kind of gives her something to do. But eventually she goes on and takes these coins and she thrusts them into her guns that are to be seen here behind her, and she uses them as ammo. So that actually is kind of a cool idea to use coins as a as basically bullets. So that's kind of interesting. You would think though, with doing something like that, that would actually destroy the gun by using it. But like maybe it just weirdly works, but also maybe for this movie it works anyways. Or it has to work. Cuz yeah, you would think that these coins would not perfectly work the way it should. But maybe someone would have to have fact checked me because there's always those mythbusters and there's always those things of trying to figure out whether this could work or not. So I'm curious if someone has tried this. So the next thing we see is again more of these night vision sites here, and they're looking at the boat. It seems that they see no human being put onto this boat, but they still overhear uh, this signal for help. So they're just very confused about like, okay, like we haven't seen human life on this boat for a number of days. Every time we look at them, it's just like a boat, and that's all we see. So Angel starts talking to Claire and starts asking about like, well, hey, maybe your friends are out on the boat somewhere. Maybe they're like, do you remember anything? And Claire's like, it's starting to come back to me, but it's just very slow. Uh, and to her, nothing much makes sense. It's all a jumbled mess. So Wendell is looking at a nudie mag, and we then would come to find that in the bathroom of this jail location, the jail floor is starting to bubble, which means that something is burrowing or digging from underneath. I would go to find that, yeah, eventually, if a zombie wants its meal bad enough, it'll dig from the underground to get to where it needs to go. Like, I would come to find in like 7 Days to Die that eventually, if you would go on and just try to get this underground fortress in 7 Days to Die, eventually the zombies will figure out a way to dig underground to try to get to you, which is rather interesting. Um, so you can wait out for a good chunk number of days, but then eventually the zombies will dig underground and get to you. So that is actually rather interesting. Like to realize that there's no definitive way. Like there is like a good number of strategies for that game, um, to have a really good fort or fortress or whatever. But yeah, it all comes down to that eventually the zombies will find you, if you were to try to make an underground bunker, which is kind of fun, to see that that game, like um, there's no hiding, there's no like, if 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 the food source is running low and you're the only thing that exists, then yeah, they're gonna try to get to you. Anyways, so here's where we go on and we see in the streets of LA, we see the Axeman just dragging his axe through the city. We see at the prison front doors that it's to be not to be contained by an axe, which eventually Luther will be providing. Because eventually this door will eventually be thrusted by this axeman that is starting to buckle the doors. Eventually this will happen. But there's so many zombies that are in front of this door that are just trying to push this thing open, and it has no give. So Luther takes Alice to this bathroom and is to show her to the shower that is still operational. So they still have water here, but it's only cold water. I'm actually amazed that I've gotten this far without hugely messing up at this point. Yeah, there's been some names I've mixed up, but yeah, like I am actually surprised about how like I haven't completely ruined this review and wanted to start all over again. But give it time. Uh, like yeah, if I had not much to assist me, yeah, this would be way harder, or I'd be kind of re-pulling back things. Um, but I think this is surprisingly a much better flow of things that I've gone on to do. Maybe I just need like 2 videos in one day to kind of even me out with these videos. I don't know. But I don't want to make that a consistent thing because that'll be a lot to try to, like, it'll be a lot for a lot of energy to use. It'll really hurt my voice and like I don't know. Like I'd like to do 2 videos when I'm doing these because that could be a lot. Um, like hopefully of more possibilities to get more people uh to find this channel better if I did 2 videos a day. But like I'm to also just think of like, well, yeah, two videos a day. I did that for like a very long time on this channel, and like they just, I don't think we're coming out really that well. Like I think I can look at it and be like, well, yeah, these 1 video things were I think it's just better, but they're way longer. Anyways, so Luther goes back into the shower room here and tells Alice, he's like, okay, I'm gonna be here. Bye. I'm gonna be like I'm gonna be, if you call out for me, I'll be there. So, which eventually he won't, because of course he was, because this is normal horror rules that if you say, oh yeah, I'll be right out here, yeah, he just disappears and vanishes. So Alice goes on to put her weapons off to the side, which is never a good move. Have one gun on you at all times. So Alice goes on and puts her gear off to the side, and then all of a sudden there's this kind of going off the side of the screen. Alice kind of turns to like, Luther, is that you? And Luther doesn't respond. So, unlike every other horror movie that I've ever seen, we would normally have the whoever character go on to be like, okay, and they would start taking off all their clothes. They get full on naked. They'd get into the shower, and then that's when they'd attack and get killed. That's when they would get attacked and get killed. That's every other horror movie I've ever seen in my life. But in this case, we have the character that goes on and grabs for their weapon and starts looking around. We come to find that Wendell, because he had just looked at nudie mags before, is now wanting to see something in the flesh. So he's going on and he's peeping at Alice. Of course, Alice, being very much upset with Wendell, puts a gun to his head and tells him to get the heck out of there. Next up, we then see the Magini Hermogeny zombie, we see like the butterfly or the the flower tentacles, as they go on. They say it in some thing somewhere. The Mogeny undead goes on and goes after both Alice, and then eventually when Wendell runs right into one and he ends up getting killed and being thrusted underground. Alice goes on to take out both zombies, or ends up going on and taking out the zombie that was attacking her, and then I think Wendell, and I think yeah, the zombie I think does go underground from memory. So they go on and they find the underground hole, and they figure out that it's coming from the sewer system, and that's what kind of led the zombies to eventually burrow their way to get to them. So now they realize at this point that they are no longer safe, that this place has now been breached. It was only a matter of time, anyways, because this place is so big, anyways. It's so interesting to go on and always watch these like big, huge environments that eventually it's like, yeah, there's only so long you could really keep it safe. Like, you can look at the original Dawn of the Dead, and there's marauders that come in. You could look at the remake and just come to find that the zombies are breaking through the like the glass doors that are to be locked, like that they're overpowering the doors that they're going to break through eventually. So, and they go on and they figure out ways to slide or make their way to climb through these areas. And yeah, like there's only so long that these places can hold out, which just makes for a more interesting like they are forced to transition kind of movies. Plus also with this place needing to change so many locations, it just makes a lot of sense. It's not like we're gonna have this whole movie that was just done within this prison environment. So, do you like my weird shift there? I I just I just finally figured out how I can go on and kind of without not actually having to lift up and move my camera, how to just kind of shift it out more. Man, what a skilled cameraman I am now. Not really. So, anyways, so now Alice is going on and telling the team uh, that at this point they need to go on and they finally need to give in to Chris's demands. That they need to finally talk to him and realize that his way about them possibly getting out of here could be sound at this point, because none of the other people really have any solid ideas besides, hey, let's get on the plane and have one by one just back and forth. Where it seems that Chris is to go on and figure out how they can arm themselves by going to this armory, by going underwater and retrieving all these bullets, and then going through this ventilation shaft to eventually meet up with the other people. But also, Chris is to go on and eventually tell them about certain vehicles that they can go on and use to get out of here. Which they'll come to find that that vehicle is to end up being pointless, because of course it is. So, but anyways, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. Uh, but also, it's kind of funny how Kim is mentioning how they should draw straws to see who's going to go on the plane first. And Bennett is mentioning how, like, well, yeah, all we need to do is just walk out of this prison, just walk single file, and yeah, like, and we'll make it out of here. There's so many zombies that, yeah, they're not gonna make it out alive. So they make their way to the prison cell. They talk to Chris, and they come up with a plan. So a lot of people are not trusting Chris. They're saying how insane he is. and that people are starting to take signs. And Angel is talking about how like Chris's plan sounds right. Or Crystal is going with Angel to be like, yeah, I think this plan does sound right. So there seems to be a majority vote that goes on to decide to free Chris here. So he then gets freed out of the cell. Chris immediately goes on and looks at Bennett and goes a big old boo. And so Bennett's like, oh, I'm a little scared. I have to be the cowering uh, guy who eventually becomes evil anyway. So ha ha ha, look at me. Look at me now. But Bennett is, I think, to be out of everybody, to be the only smart one, I think, out of this group. That instead of putting himself in danger, he goes on and then just runs for the plane and gets the F out of here, saves himself. So it's a smart plan, but also it's going to be inevitable that the rest of the group is going to find Bennett, and when they do, this guy is dead. And eventually we'll get there. We'll eventually talk about what further happens within this movie. But anyways, so Chris, as he starts to look around at all the people now out of this jail cell, he has yet to meet up with Claire. Chris goes on and starts touching Claire by the face. It's like, oh, Claire. Like, Claire. Claire. Like, I'm Chris. Yes, Claire. Claire. And Claire goes on and rips away Chris's arm and, like, puts it from underneath him as if, like, she's going to arrest him or something. But she's just kind of putting him in, like, an arm bar or something. Or not an arm bar, like an arm, like, behind his back kind of just kind of maneuver. So Claire doesn't know who this guy is. Nothing is coming to memory. Chris is going on and saying, like, how do you not know me, Claire? Like, I'm your brother. Like, how is it that the touching the face, you just didn't know who I was, Claire? How did... Anyways, so I'm trying to make funny here, but if anything, it's probably not working. A lot of people are like, this is stupid, but I'm going to keep going with this joke. So Alice has to go on and say to Claire, it's like, hey, it's okay. Like, he actually knows who you are. And, like, what he's saying does sound like he's being honest about it. It's not seeming like he's making this up. So it's just... So Alice has to go on to explain to Chris that all the touching doesn't mean anything because Claire is going through a bit of memory loss. And if you really are her brother, if anything, the memory of you will come back to her, but it's not going to come back today. So Bennett goes on and talks about how this is all touching. Yeah. Claire! Claire, it's me, your brother! Anyways, I don't know why he had to touch her that way. I would never go on and touch any of my family at, like, Ma! Sis! Like, if anything, that feels more like a husband and wife kind of interaction. Like, that doesn't feel like a brother and sister family reaction. That just seems like, why would he touch her that way? That seems so weird to me. But if anything, maybe in your family it's different. Maybe you have that weird kind of, Claire! Claire, it's me! Because if you guys remember the guy from It's a Wonderful Life, Claire! I just sound like that guy right now. Anyways, so I'm just digging a hole into that joke. Just digging my way to China. Eventually, or the hole of which that is to be in the shower. I'm digging that hole. So Chris goes on with everybody right outside the gate of this prison. So here's where he goes on, and he talks about the vehicle that they had housed within this area that they need this welding stuff to kind of break into. So he goes on and mentions about this thing is huge. It's a 16 wheeler. It's this steel plated water cannon, 10 tons of fun vehicle that they'll take so much time getting to, but they'll come to find out that the engine needs to be put inside the vehicle. And they go on and they ask Angel, it's like, well, hey, like, do you think that you can go on and basically put back in this engine? And he's like, yeah, if I have a week to be able to do it, I could probably. And it's like, dude, we don't have that kind of time. If anything, like, we have hours, not days. So, because if anything, everybody's breaking into this prison. They don't have a week to get this vehicle running. And in even that, they're not even sure if this vehicle can run. So, they're wasting so much time getting this vehicle garage open, while also Chris, Alice, and Crystal will go on and have to make their way to the armory. Claire and Luther are going on and putting a cop car, and they're trying to put an axe into the gate to stop the zombies from breaking in to this area right away. But anyways, so back with Alice and Chris. So they open this elevator slot and they come to find that the elevator slot is filled with water. I think, yeah, elevator slot. Yeah, I think that's correct. So Chris goes on to inform Alice that there is quite a bit of swim to make their way to the armory, because the armory is quite a distance from where they are, which means that there's going to be a good amount of swimming that's going on. I assumed at some point there was going to be some dead body that was going to pop out in front of us during this whole swim thing that scared somebody or had them choke on water or something, or something else of that nature was going to happen, that they were going to have to swim against zombies or whatever. But it doesn't seem to have that be the case that happens within the swim here. So Crystal gets in on with both Chris and Alice, saying that she was a champion swimmer in high school. Yeah, you can say that, but how many years was that ago? And what does that really mean with you being a champion swimmer, really? Uh, but anyways, like, I guess you have that, as well as any number of people have that qualification that's just in their just thing that they could just say, oh yeah, I'm a champion swimmer. Sure you are. So Alice gives both Crystal and Chris a gun. Chris is kind of taken back by this because Chris is like, wait a minute, you're giving me a gun now? Like, you're freeing me out of prison and then you're giving me a gun? And Alice is like, well, hey, I'm willing to trust you. Like, don't make me regret this. Like, why not? Like, what more do they have left to lose at this point? So Claire and Luther at this point are seeing the big axe wielding guy that is probably going to break down this gate. So Claire tells Luther to shoot this guy into the head. Luther does not have a rocket launcher on hand or anything that is speed, nothing more than a 6-shooter. So Luther does make an attempt to just shoot this guy multiple times in the head, but if we know anything about Resident Evil, yeah, like, you really have to go on and empty out an entire clip into these things, and still, like, there's some zombies that are just absurdly stronger than others, or they have their own specialty of really taking them out, because some of these things just don't go down so easily. But most of the time, it's to decapitate, I think, could be the definitive. Let me know in the comments below if that seems to always be the X factor of when head comes off. That seems to be the way to beat all of them. But I would just know that you would just have to go on and shooty bang bang all of them consistently, because that's all I've seen throughout a number of Resident Evil movies. Because it's not like anybody really goes on through a Resident Evil film besides maybe, or Resident Evil game, besides maybe an axe. Like, Nobody really is going on and wielding a sword or anything like that in most of these things, unless I'm incorrect. Let me know in the comments below. Maybe a shovel, but not an axe or not a sword. Anyways, so here's where we see the swimming level of Resident Evil. That's very much like we can't really tell what's going on. We just see three characters swimming through all this stuff, and we don't know what it is. Like it's just a bunch of random stuff that they're swimming through, and I'm like, okay, this means nothing to me. Like this swimming level sucks, movie. No one likes a swimming level in any game ever. That is to always be the biggest problem in every. Look at Mario. Like Mario, no one likes the swimming levels. So why do a swimming level in a movie? Unless it's an actual adventure movie where you're going on and all you're doing is swimming. Like if you're basically on a boat and it's sinking, then that makes sense. If it's any other environment, try to avoid it because it's the boring part of whatever this is. But you guys just wanted to do something different here, and this is this. This is that. So they immediately make their way to this stairwell and for them to be able to breathe. I was almost thinking of Sonic when Sonic would go on and be swimming for way too long, and eventually the horrible music that would go on and haunt you for your dreams for the rest of your life until you would go on and find that one little bubble that goes on and floats up where you're like, and then you could go on and just continue throughout your day of Sonic. But yeah, like these people are going on and starting to get and they're starting to get traumatized. They're like, oh man, are we gonna breathe? Oh, thank God. So we have Chris that thrusts out a flare that he chucks into the hallway. So at one point, while Alice and Chris and Crystal and them, they're all going on through the areas that they're going through. Off in the distance, we also see a thing kind of flicker through the camera fairly quickly. We don't know what it is, but we have to assume that it's bad. So we find that Alice has a sword in hand, and Chris has, of course, his weaponry. And Crystal ends up getting attacked and killed here. She ends up getting dragged back into the water, and then all of a sudden, all these zombies are to start to come out of this water and start attacking both of Chris and Alice. So the two of them run into the armory where they can close the door, where they're in a whole long stretch of an area just full of guns, if we have to be Keanu. Whoa. We need a lot of guns. Is that really my best Keanu? Probably not. Whoa. If anything, I'd really need like something really good of Keanu that I can go on and mimic of, because that surely isn't it. Anyways, so ways, well, anyway, whatever. So I suck at it. Anyways, if anything, it would just be anything that would just sound like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. That's probably what Keanu really sounds to me of. Even though he's probably lost a little bit of the surfer in him, yeah, still like there still is just that just jogs into my brain noggin of what he sounds like. So here's where they finally go on and they reveal that they've made their way into this garage, and and Alice, they made their way in the garage to find the huge vehicle that'll eventually be a waste of their time. While both Chris and both Alice are making their way into the armory and getting all of the possible hundreds and hundreds of bullets that they can go on and get here. So Chris is to reveal to Alice that there's no way that they can go on and get through that door that they just came from, because there are probably way too many zombies out there. There are probably hundreds of zombies probably waiting for them. So they go on and they look at this ventilation shaft that is to be above them. So, like, okay, that seems to be the way to get out of here. So now, after they find out that the engine is going to take a week to assemble, Bennett ends up getting too antsy, so he kills Angel. He kills Angel. Kim is to look at Bennett and be like, "What have you done?" Bennett is thinking it's like, "Well, hey, I only need one to fly this plane, so I guess I'm gonna have to be it." So Bennett and Kim run to the plane at this point because they think that there is no other alternative but that. So they make their way to the plane as Kim is going on and talking about the others, and Bennett is like, F them, like, let's save ourselves. It's like, hey man, either get on board or die here with everyone else. So now we have Claire and we have Luther that is calling out to him. It's like, hey, what are you doing? They're coming to find that the door that's getting them to the plane is kind of locked behind them. Uh, Bennett goes on and fires off of his gun, and eventually this gate is to have been broken by Luther. Luther and the gang go on and start chasing after Bennett. And Bennett ends up going on and getting off of the roof, and eventually he starts falling. Luther goes on and is like, oh yeah, you aren't going to make it. Yeah, F you. Yeah, that's right. So Bennett goes on and starts to be diving with the plane, starts to crash into a good chunk of zombies, but then inevitably does go on and does get back up to then start flying off. So now Bennett is on his own, making his way to the plane. So as we start to see zombies coming in and starting to attack our heroes here. So Alice, Chris, everybody who has survived left has all been grouped up together onto this rooftop. And so now they're facing off against all these zombies with all their new ammunition. So what Alice does is Alice goes on to have everybody make their way into this elevator. And Alice is going to go on and meet up with them later. Because these guys are trying to figure out that this elevator has no power, and Chris is like, yeah, we won't really need power. We'll just need to explode the very top of this elevator to where it falls. And so the guys have to just kind of brace for this eventual impact that's going to happen to them. So, and I think at some point there is actually a tactic for you to be able to survive an elevator fall. You have to go on, you have to basically get to as low as you can to the elevator, and hope that you're not falling from like hundreds upon like at some point, like there is probably not a much of an elevator impact that you probably may not go on and make out of, but like of course for a movie they have to go on and do this to make the people survive because this is a movie, like it's different circumstances. So they're gonna go on and probably say that these people could survive this elevator fall, but in reality they would probably be killed. Someone would die. Something would happen. Anyways, so but back to the movie here. Alice goes on, throws the explosives on top of the elevator. The explosives do what they're made to do, which is to explode. The elevator falls, and so Alice is to be feeling the impact. She falls over, and then needs to get back up shortly thereafter that to tie herself to this huge line of wire that was to have saved her before, is now going to save her again. So Alice is firing off at all the zombies, and then she's going to eventually Tarzan her way, seemingly down um, to another level of this prison, so then she can go on and re-meet up with the rest of the group. Uh, and eventually she'll go on and she'll be flying. She'll be doing this almost like Spider-Man esque, like where she does this like roll and then starts firing off on all the zombies. Eventually, to have Luther say, "Hey, we're over here," and then so Alice starts to run to where they are at. So she goes on and starts using every bullet or every gun in her arsenal. Which, man, with her going on and her getting to the armory, man, it doesn't really seem like she has enough guns on her, right? It doesn't really seem like she did nothing more than just to add to her already guns that she already had. Like it didn't really seem like she had like a billion like guns that she was holding on to. Uh yeah, because maybe in that ventilation shaft it forced them to not take endless amounts of guns, right? But anyways. So like I said, we have Alice that's going on and re-meeting up back with the group at the lower level. And Luther ends up thrusting down this garage door. So we now have the plan for them to use that sewer hole that was already dug in from the movie before. So they foreshadow this. It's like, hey, yeah, like, I guess we should just use this hole now because it makes the most sense. Because everybody's trying to break in anyways. Why don't we just break through this hole that is already to be made? They realize that eventually the sewer will lead them to the sea, and then the sea will lead them to the boat. So that's what they're hoping. That's what they're hoping for. So, so Chris says that he's going to go down to the hole first. Luther seconds it. The further and further we start to have the dwindling down of people, it's left with Alice, Kim, and Claire is to be the only ones that are not going to the hole so quickly because they're forcing Kim to like, hey, go already, like go in there, like be the next person, and Kim is just very hesitant. Maybe he's claustrophobic. Maybe there could be any number of reasons. Maybe he's thinking that he's going to die if he's going next. Could be any number of things. So, if anything, I probably would not want to go on and either be first or last. If anything, I'd probably want to be much more in the middle. And that's what Kim could actually have been. Um, Especially with Kim not having any guns, you would think that he would probably want people with guns at either very front or very end. That's just my thought process. So, as they're trying to get Kim to make his way down the hole, if anything, fate will step in and decide what Kim is going to do for him by killing him. The Axeman comes in here and is to slice through Kim like he's butter. And both Alice and Claire are like, huh? So we would have Alice that comes flying in with a kick, hoping to take this guy down. Yeah. A roundhouse kick or a kick of any kind, no matter how hard you've flown through the air, is not going to do this guy in. I'm sorry, I hate to break it to you. So, this guy treats this kick like nothing, and so he goes on and starts thrusting out his axe to go on and attack Alice, forcing her via his axe to be pushed in certain directions or for her to get thrusted into this wall. So eventually Claire goes on and it's to be like, well, okay, I'll give me a piece of that axe, man. As she goes on and tries to attack this axeman herself, and then realizes like, oh, now I need to go on and I need to fight this thing. So Claire starts to dodge the axeman as a number of these shower stalls start to get destroyed, and the water starts to burst all over the place. We start to see that this ends up turning for Claire almost a wet t-shirt contest, and ooh la la, woo, yeah, whatever. So as Claire gets all wet and dripply and whatever, so Claire goes on and starts to eventually try to get away from the Axemen to eventually try to get to that double barrel shotgun, a short, small shotgun of a thing, knowing that that could be a definitive thing to take this Axeman out. So, what Claire goes on to do is she uh, inevitably goes on to get the double barrel. She slides because now like the whole environment is all wet and all like slippery, whatever. So Claire slides in between the Axeman's legs. Luckily, his legs were wide open that day, and she slides in between him, shoots him, and that is definitively not to be the exact thing that is to actually take him down here. If anything, that actually drops him down. Claire thinks she's like, yeah, I'm a badass. I took this thing down. Ooh, yeah, look at me. But the Axeman ends up getting back up. He ends up grabbing his axe. Then Alice goes on and is to grab Claire so that way they can dodge yet another axe attack where because this axeman goes on and chucks his axe to try to get to them, and they conveniently dodge it perfectly. Alice goes on and takes her double barrel, fires it off, and blows up the entire axeman's head. Because if anything, Claire just loosened it up. But if anything, Alice is going to come in to do the final blow. Because of course she is. So the axeman finally goes down because he doesn't have a head, but he has a neck full of coins. So we now cut to them looking at the axe and then them focusing on this drain. So both Claire and both Alice follow their nose through the sewer drain or the hole of which that was to be dug from underground here. So as they further and further make their way, they eventually bump back into Luther. Luther is to tell them to try to be quiet. There's a possibility that there might be zombies nearby. And so, if anything, yeah, let's try to be careful here. Luther goes on and asks them about Kim. They give him a big old no, saying that, yeah, he's dead. Or he has to assume that he's dead, because, yeah, there's no other way that that guy's was bound to survive this movie anyways. He's one of those guys, whenever you have a movie where a character is to be way too scared, or if a person screams way too often in a movie, you're just hoping that that person, if they scream too often in a movie, you're really hoping that that person is going to end up dead. But if they end up being way too scared in a horror film, yeah, they're more likely to be the person that ends up getting killed than anyone else. Because if anything, it's like, oh, like we've built up so much in this movie that this person's more scared than anyone else. So when they die, it's like, we were hoping that the really non-scared guy would end up surviving this, right? No. That never happens. I hate to break it to anybody who gets really scared in horror situations. Yeah, like the more scared you get, the more likely you're going to die. I hate to break it always to you, because that is a cliche. Plus, when you're scared and in scared environments, the less you think. So you have to figure out a way to break through that, or otherwise you're gonna have a much more shorter lifespan. I'm sorry to hate to break that to you. So Luther, Claire, and Alice make their way through this underground tunnel, and yeah, they do meet up with zombies that have the Magini, the unique butterfly flower tentacles coming out of them, and they do to kill it off. So the next thing after that, they do find this boat, and so they are able to make their way to the Arcadia. They make their way on board. It seems so easy. It seems so convenient. So they had gone through a number of days and noticed there was never anybody from the outside of this boat. But they end up talking about how there's no welcome party for them. They also come to find that Bennett's plane had crash landed, so no more plane. So they realize that Bennett must have gotten out of the plane alive somehow. So they start looking inside the boat. It seems that there is no one inside of this. There's no evidence of actual people that are there. They go on and they do find the whole looping signal. So at least there's that. So Chris is to mention upon the boat that there are supposedly 200 survivors. And so that is something that they need to figure out where the survivors at on this boat somewhere. So they start looking through these containers. They start looking through what eventually is to be these doors that has this umbrella symbol on it. And so they're like, well, this must be it. So they're to go on and think at first that going to this, or they start to think at this point that going on this boat was actually a lie to them. But if anything, Claire goes on and says, no, it's a lot worse. It's actually that this is a trap and they're going into it. But they have to anyways to figure out where the survivors are. And it's a final boss like battle. So they make their way into this empty room that has all this white around it. And it's like, okay, like, what is this room about? So they're like, how is it that this entire boat looks completely empty, but there's 2,000 survivors? Like, where could they be? So as Alice starts to look at the ground, she notices that there could be a possibility that the 2,000 survivors could be underneath them, that they're in containers underneath them, and that's where they could be housed. So they find this little tablet or little device where they can go on and start to toggle, and they start to look through people, and they even find that Kmart is there. So Alice goes on to tell both Chris and Claire, hey, open up every single container, because I'm sure all these people are probably going to go on and either help us out or are to go on and be people that could ally ourselves with. So yeah, like we can go on and really be able to have the benefit of these people once we free all of them. So Kmart ends up getting freed and she doesn't really know who she is. And so like Kmart is kind of like, whoa. So they rip off her scare from her chest and they try to explain who she is and explain to her, like, hey, we're here to help you. Alice goes onto one of the containers, and it seems that possibly one of the containers may have had somebody either turn into a zombie, or there was just a zombie in this container that somehow had broken free once eventually there was an option to be able to do so. So Alice starts to follow the blood trail, eventually going into another door that opens. Alice comes to find very next to her is to seemingly be this bomb. Having Alice know Wesker very well, he just likes to go on and find these areas and put explosives on them. So Alice, I'm assuming off camera, had taken the time to find these possible explosives within this boat and put him in a very safe place, which eventually will be explained at some point within this movie. So Chris starts to follow where Alice had to have gone. Uh, and so Alice starts to make her way into this room where there seems to be a number of different bodies that are placed next to her. It doesn't seem like these bodies are going to reanimate, help assist Wesker here. It doesn't seem that these bodies are nothing but like, hey, they're there. Look at this visual. Uh, like maybe these bodies should have gone on and gotten up and should have helped Wesker, but that just weirdly did not happen. So Alice goes on further into the room and starts to find these screens that are consistently going up. And then eventually leads, after seeing all these screens, to Alice meeting up with Wesker. And at this point, Alice is like, why am I not surprised that I'm finally to see you here? So Wesker knew that at some point that Alice will be led back to him. That if anything, Alice will always go on and need to get back to her friends. And all Wesker needed to do is to collect some of them. Not all of them, but some of them. Because Wesker knew that that would be all the enticing bit of thing to lead then Alice to then get back to him. So now all of a sudden these zombie dogs start to appear. And Alice is thinking that she's going to go on and need to fight against them. But Wesker all of a sudden tells them to sit and he is to go on and show Alice how well trained these zombie dogs are. So Wesker has really figured some things out. If only he can go on and train zombies like he's trained these dogs, that would be pretty genius. But if anyways, so Bennett comes from behind Alice, telling her to drop her guns, kicking them to him, and eventually we're like, okay, when is this fight gonna start here? So we go on to have Wesker, who's to mention how he needs to ingest Alice so that way he can keep his infection in bay, and it'll help by consuming her to better himself. So that's why he's going to go on and just try to eat Alice here, instead of legitimately like uh, want to just have her be killed so easily or killed so quickly. So because he basically wants to fight her himself, anyways, and consume her. So how we finally kick off this fight after way too long. Alice goes on and mentions about like, well, hey, yeah, it's great that you want to consume me and all, but if anything, I'm not on the menu. She goes on and kicks this tray full of all of these scalpels and knives and what have you. They go flying and they all go on and they hit right onto Wesker's chair. All like darts on a dartboard, they're all go flinging right by him, and he dodges this because he's so skilled, and they all hit onto his chair. So Wesker is going to get a little bit of blood on his like a little just a little nick on his face. And this is just like Thanos. If you guys remember Infinity War, where Thanos would go on and face off against Iron Man, where he's like, all of that just for a drop of blood. Like that's basically Wesker here. So as Wesker gets up, We then have the zombie dogs that come into play here. The zombie dogs start to then go into their own weird flower effect where they go on and they take their half of their body, they split it in half and they start to separate in a grotesque, just like, really, we're going there, okay. So, but I guess that's just the way to escalate the visuals here. But also, like, we're probably gonna have these dogs to have a number of people just to be like, man, the CGI on these dogs are not really that great. But like, hey, look at how like eventually they separate. Ooh ah, look at that. Ooh ah, yeah. So at least it's poor CGI with with this kind of cool extra thing. So here's where Claire and here's where Chris come into frame here. Uh, Wesker goes on and like, oh hey yeah, I'm so happy to have a family reunion here between both Chris and Claire, and but also things are quite coming inconvenient for Wesker. So Alice is to say how like, well yeah, you wanted me to bring a few friends, and Wesker's to go on and say, well I wish you would have brought a few more. Wesker goes on and takes his glasses. I think that someone had also gone on and done this in a movie where, like, there's a whole thing about like flinging glasses. I think that's in Blade, where Blade goes on and he has his glasses like flinged to him, and like Blade catches it and he puts it on. I think that happens in Blade 2, where Blade catches the glasses and then just because it, I think it's coming from a Whistler where he chucks it and he catches it. He's like, yeah. We would go on to have Wesker who takes off his glasses. He chucks them at Claire and Chris. Chris catches the glasses. Wesker goes on to start attacking both Chris and Claire while Alice is still going on and dealing with the zombie dogs. Man, in the last movie, Alice would go on and so quickly take out the zombie dogs like it's nothing. This time around, it's a little bit more challenging. So, she can't just go on and snap the necks of these zombie dogs and call it a day. Well, it's not that easy now, is it? So, we would have Wesker getting back his sunglasses, but now he has to go on and perform like the agents from the Matrix are. And as Claire and Chris are firing at him, he has to go on and do all of these lavish, goofy flips into the air, and all of these things that are go on and be quite acrobatic, but then again, also just like they're doing this because 3D film. Like, this just looks goofy. Like this just looks like, man, they're really like, man, they're really showing the acrobatics of these characters, but they finally want to go on and give you a Wesker that looks intimidating and actually is a Wesker that actually fights people for once, instead of him just sitting at a chair doing dick. So I can appreciate that, at least, that they're doing that. So Wesker eventually goes on to grab Claire, forcing Chris to not be able to fire at Wesker. Claire goes on and drives a knife into Wesker's thigh, freeing Claire from Wesker. Wesker takes the knife out, goes on and looks at it, and then goes on to continue to fight both Claire and both Chris, as he's dodging bullets and going on to simultaneously take down both Claire and Chris at the same time, leaving them into these tubes where they are to be thrusted down and locked away. Alice goes on to finally figure out how within her weapons of ammo to take down one zombie dog within shotgun, and then goes on to eventually have a bunch of glass flying in the air, and Alice kicks one and slices the zombie dog in complete half, taking that out as well. So, or at least slicing the dog to where it goes on and has a very much impact here. So Bennett goes on and takes a knife and jabs it into Alice's arm. I've completely not gone on and mentioned anything of Bennett's connection with Wesker here, as Wesker goes on and says how basically Bennett is now working with him now, and there is not much to need to go really in depth about that this guy has turned, he's become evil, and he's not going to become any unevil at any point in this movie. So after the stabbing in the arm, now we have Alice that has this knife in her arm. Wesker goes on to expand his butterfly flower tentacles from out of his mouth that becomes way more massive than any of the other infected zombies that we've ever gone on to see. So Alice then goes on to take this knife, I believe, from her arm and jabs it into Wesker's head. Wesker falls over, he takes his own knife from his head, pulls it back out, and comes after Alice once more. All of a sudden, Kmart comes into the fray here, and Bennett is like, "Who are you?" And so what ends up inevitably happening here, Kmart goes on and throws Alice this weapon for Alice to use. And Alice takes said weapon, shoots Wesker in the face, close contact, and Wesker then goes and falls over, blood pooling from his brain. We'll realize that Wesker is to be an unbeatable foe, that it's very hard, and he has a healing factor and a number of things. It's very hard to take a guy like this down. To where it gets to the point to where in sequel, it seems that he ends up just becoming an ally to Alice and eventually helps her, because what else can you do with Wesker? We can even go on in Requiem and see that Wesker is to align himself with Grace at a point in time, and kind of goes along with her so that way he can get what he wants. But then inevitably, like, we find that Leon is trying to take Wesker down for what, the how many time now that he's gone on and tried to have these guys face off against Wesker, and probably just think that they've gotten him down just for him to reappear somewhere else eventually, because that always happens. Anyways, so Wesker got you down. That seems like a commercial. So after Alice is to have taken down Wesker, she then goes on to free both Chris and Claire. After going on and doing that, we'd start to see that Wesker starts to heal himself. Both Chris and Claire get out their guns as if this is Boondock Saints, and they just start unloading all of their bullets into Wesker. Just like, hey, yeah, let's empty the clip. Yeah, like, pa, 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 pa. They just start shooting throughout Wesker, his entire body. And what good does that really do? Not a whole lot. So they leave the room and have Bennett, who is to have been stayed behind. He's calling out to them, trying to threaten them that they should free him, and they won't. They eventually destroy the talking comm, and so Bennett is now left to his own devices. Wesker reheals himself and then consumes Bennett, and then the next thing we are to go on and see is that Wesker, on his own, takes one of these planes and leaves to evacuate this plane or to evacuate this boat. And when he goes on and does so, we have Chris and Claire that are trying to fire these guns and hoping to get this plane. Wesker goes on and just like, ha, whatever. Like, you're not going to get me. Like, I'm the gingerbread man. You're never going to catch me. So Wesker goes on and detonates the explosives upon the boat. And it's like, ha ha ha. Like, I'm going to get them in the end. So all of a sudden, after Wesker goes on and detonates the explosive, Wesker starts to look around the plane. Because he's like, yeah, something doesn't seem right here. Wesker goes on and starts looking at the plane to find out that the explosive that Alice had seen before is to have been removed from the boat and is to now be exactly on that exact plane that now Wesker is now on. Hopefully going on and having then Wesker to have been killed here, which of course he isn't. Because why would he be killed? I also, like, we'd also probably have to assume that maybe Wesker could have cloned himself, or Wesker could go on and just be unkillable. And so, definitively, I'm sure there's an explanation for Retribution why he's still there. Either way, you would think that maybe he could have had plenty enough time to have freed himself from from plane. He could have jumped in the water and saved himself that way, and he could have survived. Could have been a possibility. So Alice has both Chris and Claire run outside the boat so that way they can see the explosion of detonation of Wesker's ship. And they probably, I think they get it at the neck of time. So after that, they're like, okay, so what do we do next? We come to find that Luther, there was a possibility that Luther was to have been accidentally left for dead at some point within the sewer tunnel. That eventually he had to fight his way through people, and that's why I didn't talk about him after a certain point. So we come to find out that after all, Luther did survive, and he's now to have guns firing off on all these zombies. And so he's talking about how he has star power and so on and so forth. So eventually he hopes, or we hope that Luther will probably regain and meet up with either Alice at this movie, or will go on and meet up with Leon and his people within the sequel film, because I'm assuming that's going to happen. So now we have all the people free on the boat. If anything, they're like, okay, what's the next thing to do now? Alice goes on and is to erase the previous message, and she is to put in place her own. Going on and saying how this boat is now for people who are to have possible hope. So the next thing we see after that is we see a bunch of Umbrella Corporation planes hugely making their way to this boat. And they're like, oh, what are we going to do now? And it's like, well, the only thing we can do, we just have to fight our way through this like we always do. So that goes on and gives us a cliffhanger ending, saying that there's probably going to be a sequel, that this movie has been making so much money that they're going to just keep doing this. And we, of course, have to realize that, there's Retribution coming. So there's going to be that thing. So I'm going to watch that eventually. So I'm going to get the heck out of here. Almost an hour over what this movie really was. I could really just not care. Because, if anything, like, I had gone on and done 2 videos this day, and this movie was almost 2.5 hours long. But this video was almost 2.5 hours, so I'm happy. I'm fine with going on and doing that because if anything, I also think that video will probably, the other one that I did will probably go nowhere, or really that this video will probably do something So it'll be worth it. I'm not going on and thinking that it's going to do crazy numbers or what. I'm hoping that it just does something. But either way, uh, this is going to be uploaded. That's great. I don't think I'm going to be able to have the brain power to do another one of these. Uh, like I Nah, I'll probably go on and I should probably uh just be farming for Timu and then just kind of call it a day after that. But at least I've done 2 videos. At least my voice isn't hoarse or horrible right now, so that's great. So it's thank you all for going on and watching this. I really appreciate it. I do. Uh, hope for the best for anything that's going to go on in the channel. I I really can't figure out how to really figure out how to make everyone happy. I really obviously can. Um, it's just so hard to figure out what exact one video that I can do every other day or whatever to just make 500 people always happy. But I'm trying to make the best possible choices I can. Um, right now, more so than I probably have in a very long time. Um, I'm making choices that it seems that a lot of people are interested in via the votes and the stuff that I've done at some certain points. And I don't know what I could ask more than that, other than to ask every individual person um, what they want and hoping that they will respond. And even that, it's just like 500 people with 500 probably different answers is not going to really help to like where I should go with the channel. Um, but if anything, I'm going to just try my best to just try to make the best possible decisions via given on uh, the views and the way of which that the channel seems to be very consistently be shaping up. There should be animes that I honestly should be have gone back to at this point, and I haven't. So it'll be tempting once I start to dwindle down these titles. When I start to dwindle down the things that I said that I was going to do and I was going to cover. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what next out of the number of lists of things that I've gone on to state that I was going to do. Cause it's funny at this point now, I've kind of had 2 different lists of 2 different things that's like, this is what I'm saying that I'm gonna do, and I'm hoping that I'm gonna keep living up to that list, and get those things at least crossed off at this point. Ha. With that said, it's time to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.